I knew something was wrong the second I turned onto Ashwood Lane. There was a crowd gathered in front of my house, not emergency vehicles or delivery trucks, but a full-blown yard sale, right there on my lawn. After working a grueling 16-hour shift at the emergency department, all I wanted was a hot shower, a dark room, and 12 hours of silence. Instead, I slowed to a stop in my driveway, staring in disbelief as strangers rifled through tables piled with what looked a lot like my stuff. Confused, I stepped out of the car and took a few steps forward. That's when I saw Karen. There she was, in her mid-60s, platinum-dyed bob cut stiff in the breeze, rocking a floral maxi dress and wedge sandals like she was at a weekend market. Karen lived 2 houses down, and until today, we'd shared no more than polite waves and the occasional HOA reminder slipped under my door. But now? She was front and center on my lawn, laughing with buyers, collecting bills, handing out plastic bags. "Excuse me," I said, trying to sound calm. My voice cracked from exhaustion. "What's going on here?" She turned slowly, smile fading into a thin, smug line. "Oh," she said, her tone condescending. "You're home early." It was 2 p.m. on a Sunday. I walked closer, scanning the tables. My vintage turntable. The signed first edition of Invisible Man I got for my 30th birthday. My grandfather's World War II medals, laid out like they were discount costume jewelry. Each item had a sticker. Some labeled $1, others labeled free. "Karen, these are my things," I said, my voice low, tight. "I'm aware," she replied without flinching. "You've left your lawn unattended for weeks. Your garbage bin stayed out for days. The HOA has rules, and I decided to help. The neighborhood was starting to look, well, neglected. You broke into my home." Karen gave a dismissive wave. "Let's not get dramatic. Everyone knows you keep your spare key under the garden frog. You practically invited the help." That's when the world shifted. Not just because she'd invaded my privacy, but because of the casual racism in her voice, the kind that assumes entitlement. The kind that smirks when it says, "You're kind." I stood there frozen, strangers flipping through the chapters of my life on display. Karen leaned closer. "You should be thanking me. Consider this a cleanse." I looked around at the people buying my memories, the pieces of my identity reduced to loose change. No. This wasn't a yard sale. This was a robbery in broad daylight, sanctioned by the worst kind of authority, a neighborhood Karen with an HOA badge and a god complex. And I knew right then, this wasn't over. Not even close. Karen had crossed a line. Not a metaphorical one, not a socially accepted oops line, an actual, legal, felony-worthy line. And I was standing in the wreckage of my trust, watching my life get tagged and haggled over like it was junk from a storage auction. I took a breath and walked toward the display table with the sign marked, "Free." That's when I saw it. My father's medical books, the very ones he left me after he passed, stacked next to a crumpled tote bag that once sat in my closet. And there, just beside it, my collection of James Baldwin first editions, worn but pristine. Those books had traveled with me from apartment to apartment, house to house. They were part of me. Karen glanced in my direction. "No one's interested in those," she said, shrugging. "I figured at least someone could use them for, I don't know, tax deductions." I clenched my jaw. "You gave them away?" "They didn't fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood," she said, voice lowered. "A little too ethnic, don't you think?" My skin flushed hot, my hands trembling. She wasn't just violating my home, she was desecrating my family's legacy. This wasn't about a messy lawn. This was about power. About control. And Karen wielded her HOA title like a crown. "You need to shut this down. Now," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, honey. This is a community fundraiser. You're the only one making it unpleasant. Fundraiser? For what? The HOA's snack fund? You're trespassing, Karen. You broke into my house. That's breaking and entering, that's theft, and that's a hate crime, considering what just came out of your mouth. Karen didn't flinch. She reached into her designer tote and pulled out her phone. What are you doing? She smiled sweetly. Calling my brother. He's a police officer in this district. He'll explain how civil forfeiture works. You left your property unguarded. Technically, it's abandoned. My heart thudded in my chest. I knew she was bluffing. Civil forfeiture didn't apply to someone's private home. But Karen was playing a different game, and she had just called in backup. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up to my driveway. The officer stepped out, shades on, hand resting casually on his hip. I knew instantly who he was, Officer Ron Corbin, Karen's older brother. Same tight-lipped frown. Same entitlement. He didn't walk toward me. He went straight to Karen. What's the issue here? He asked her, voice low but sharp. Karen launched into her version of the story, painting me as some ungrateful neighbor who didn't appreciate a well-meaning charity sale. I stood still, phone in hand, recording. When she finally finished, I stepped forward. Officer, my name is Marcus Bennett. I live here. I have proof of ownership, including photos, receipts, and my ID. This woman broke into my home and began selling my personal property. Ron barely looked at me. Do you have any proof this wasn't voluntary? That you didn't give permission? Yes, I said. I haven't spoken more than 10 words to her in the last year. And I have security camera footage on the porch. It would have recorded any conversation, if there had been one. A lie. I didn't have cameras. But Karen didn't know that. Her expression faltered. He told me Tuesday. Or maybe it was Wednesday, she said quickly. He said he was overwhelmed and needed help organizing. I was working double shifts both days, I said. Check my time cards at County General. Ron shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, he glanced at my ID and the photos I pulled up. Pictures of the Baldwin books on my shelf. My father's leather-bound journal beside my reading lamp. This looks like a misunderstanding, he muttered. I suggest you both settle this civilly. Settle? I snapped. She's giving away my belongings. She called me ethnic. She entered my house without consent. That's not a misunderstanding. That's criminal. Ron's jaw tightened. Watch your tone. Or what? I said quietly. You'll arrest me for defending my own property? By now, most of the shoppers had wandered off. A few lingered at the sidewalk, pretending not to eavesdrop. I turned back to Karen. Get everyone off my lawn. And prepare a list of everything you've sold. I want it all back. That's not realistic, she scoffed. Most paid in cash. Some of it was junk anyway. Then you'll reimburse me in full. I have appraisals. And if you don't, I'll sue you and the HOA. Karen laughed, nervous this time. Try me, I said. This is all being documented. That's when I noticed Gloria went across the street. She was holding her phone, angled toward us. The red recording dot was unmistakable. Karen noticed her too. Ron cleared his throat. All right. Miss Corbin, I need you to write a statement about how you acquired this property. Mr. Bennett, I'll need a formal complaint. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Ron, you can't be serious. We'll talk later, he muttered. He turned to me. You can file at the precinct. I nodded. I'll be there after my shift tomorrow. Karen said nothing as she began gathering the remaining items, muttering under her breath. Ron stood by her side, no longer the enforcer, just her embarrassed brother. I stayed outside for another 15 minutes, documenting everything. The tables. The signs. The boxes labeled "Donate." My heart pounded, but I wasn't shaking anymore. Karen thought this was over. But I had just begun. Marcus Bennett didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, that had burned off the moment Karen called her brother. It was something else now. Something steadier. Sharper. It was focus. While the rest of the neighborhood tucked into bed, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with a notebook and a steaming mug of black coffee. On one page, names. On the other, actions. He wasn't just going to respond. He was going to dismantle them. First, he made calls. At midnight, he spoke to Anthony Reeves, a longtime friend and civil rights attorney in Denver. Marcus told him everything. The yard sale. The break-in. The racism. The thinly veiled threat from Officer Ron Corbin. Anthony didn't even let him finish before replying, "You've got a case, Marcus. And not just a civil one. I'm coming down there tomorrow." At 12:30, he called Dr. Letitia Charles, his hospital administrator. She was more than a boss, she was a mentor who had once told Marcus, "Don't wait for justice to come to you. Sometimes, you gotta schedule it." Letitia promised she'd reach out to the city council before sunrise. By 1:15 a.m., Marcus had spoken with Jerome Price, a cousin who worked for a local news station. Jerome's response was simple: "Do you want this on the 6 o'clock, or do you want me to hold for a week and turn it into a series?" "Hold," Marcus said. "Let me file. Let me prepare. Then hit them with the truth." Just before 2 a.m., he sent an email to Gloria One, the retired judge across the street. He thanked her for recording the incident and asked, gently, if she'd be willing to make a formal statement. She responded within 15 minutes, "You're not alone. I've seen too many like her. Let me know how I can help." Then he pulled out his laptop and began his own research. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the vice president of the Maple Glen HOA. Her name popped up in meeting minutes, newsletters, and neighborhood forums. Her fingerprints were everywhere, from decisions about lawn height to which holiday lights were acceptable. She wasn't just a Karen. She was the Karen. And her brother, Officer Corbin? 3 civilian complaints, all involving Black or Hispanic residents. None had resulted in discipline. All had been quietly swept under the rug. By the time the sun cracked the horizon, Marcus had built a strategy. Step 1, file a formal report with the police precinct, not with Ron, but with a supervisor. Step 2, contact the HOA Oversight Committee and demand an emergency hearing. Step 3, submit a complaint to the Civilian Review Board about Ron's involvement. Step 4, coordinate with Anthony to file a civil suit for damages, racial harassment, and emotional distress. At 9 a.m. sharp, Marcus walked into the precinct, a folder thick with evidence in hand. He requested to speak with a supervisor. Not just a desk sergeant, someone higher. After some persistence, he was led to Captain Alicia Grant, a calm, composed woman with 30 years on the force and no time for games. Marcus laid it all out. The unauthorized entry. The removal of property. The racially charged language. The threats of arrest. The HOA power play. Captain Grant didn't interrupt once. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "We'll open an internal investigation into Officer Corbin's conduct," she said. "I'll need copies of everything you have." "You'll have it by noon," Marcus replied. By 2 p.m., Anthony Reeves arrived in person, laptop and legal pad in hand. He began drafting the civil complaint in Marcus's living room. At 3:30 p.m., Dr. Charles called with an update. The City Council Ethics Board wanted to speak with Marcus. One of their members, Peter Chen, lived just 4 blocks away and had already heard whispers about the incident. And at 6 p.m., Marcus filed his official complaint with the Maple Glen HOA board, requesting an emergency removal vote for Karen Corbin, citing egregious abuse of power and racial misconduct. The next 48 hours unfolded like dominoes. The police department placed Ron Corbin on administrative leave. The HOA issued a statement. "We are aware of allegations involving one of our board members and take such matters seriously." Councilman Raphael Harper, a black veteran of Maple Glen politics, called Marcus directly. "This isn't the first time I've heard about her. But it's the first time someone stood up and documented it." On Thursday morning, Karen's car was absent from her driveway. Rumors circulated that she had taken a trip out of town. Her house sat still and quiet for the first time in years. Friday, a courier delivered a cease and desist letter from Karen's personal lawyer, claiming Marcus's defamation on social media and public platforms was unlawful. Anthony smiled when he read it. Good. That means she's scared. That same evening, Marcus stood in front of a community gathering at the local rec center. Gloria introduced him as a neighbor who saw injustice and didn't back down. He spoke calmly, clearly, and without malice. He didn't need to exaggerate. The facts were damning enough. "Some of you saw what happened," he said. "Some of you heard her words. Some of you were shopping that day. But I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to say that what happened to me, what Karen tried to do, is not just a misunderstanding. It's a pattern. And it ends now." Applause rose from unexpected places. After the meeting, a line of neighbors approached him, offering support, sharing their own quiet Karen stories, thanking him. By the time Marcus got home, he had more than allies. He had a movement. Anthony sat at his kitchen table with the civil filing nearly ready. "We'll file Monday. But I think you just won something bigger than court." Marcus looked out his window, back at the lawn that had been his battlefield. Karen tried to humiliate him there. But that lawn? It wasn't a crime scene anymore. It was a stage. And Marcus Bennett was just getting started. Monday arrived with a cold, bright sun glaring through Marcus's blinds. The air was crisp, but inside his chest was a storm. His feet hit the floor before the alarm could buzz. He dressed slowly, methodically. Dark jeans, ironed shirt, watch, everything crisp, deliberate. He didn't just want to feel ready. He wanted to look it. At 10 a.m., Anthony met him at the courthouse. The civil lawsuit was filed within the hour, Bennett vs. Corbin and Maple Glen HOA. Alleging trespass, destruction of property, racial discrimination, and emotional harm. Anthony included photographic evidence, timestamps, and copies of Karen's flyers boasting about the community sale. But the real leverage came not from the documents, but the momentum. Marcus's story had spread beyond Maple Glen. Jerome's news station launched a teaser for a 2-part special on suburban HOA overreach, titled "The Power Behind the Fence." The clips included blurred shots of Karen's yard sale and audio from her racial remarks. The public wanted more, and Marcus was ready to give it. That afternoon, Marcus received an invitation to appear on a local panel organized by the city's Office of Community Equity. The topic: neighborhood power structures and civil rights. He said yes. Tuesday brought more fuel. Gloria confirmed that several homeowners had submitted statements documenting prior incidents with Karen. Many of them immigrants, retirees, or people of color. The dots connected quickly. What Karen did to Marcus wasn't an isolated act, it was her system. The Police Internal Affairs Division scheduled an interview with Marcus for Wednesday. Captain Grant had expedited the review after noting prior complaints against Officer Corbin with striking similarities. This time, they wouldn't be brushed off. Meanwhile, Karen remained conspicuously absent from public view. Her lawyer sent another letter. A meek offer to return any remaining items from the yard sale and mediate. Anthony laughed. We don't mediate with burglars. On Thursday, Marcus met with Peter Chen at City Hall. The Ethics Board had convened a special hearing. Chen greeted him with a firm handshake. The way you handled yourself? You made waves. Good waves. Marcus presented his case calmly, no dramatics, just the facts. How the HOA had been weaponized, how Ron had enabled Karen, how the power structures were built to intimidate. This isn't just about me, Marcus said. This is about who gets to feel safe in their own home. By Friday, changes had already started. Councilman Harper introduced a new city ordinance limiting HOA authority on private property. Karen was officially suspended from her HOA role pending investigation. The civil case advanced to discovery. And the mayor's office reached out to Marcus personally. Would he be willing to help draft policy to ensure protections for minority homeowners? Yes, he said. Absolutely. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, staring at the growing file of documents, statements, and news clippings. What started as personal defense had become a platform. But beneath the victories, one thing was clear: this was bigger than Karen. This was about systems, and now, those systems were shaking. By the next Monday, everything accelerated. The first hearing date for Marcus's civil case was scheduled for the following month. Karen's legal team scrambled to delay, but the judge, after reviewing preliminary evidence, refused. The case was moving forward, and it was moving fast. Meanwhile, Jerome's two-part news special aired. The footage was damning. Blurred faces. Clean audio. Clear racism. The news anchor's voiceover asked the question that had been swirling in the community for weeks: how many times had this happened before someone had the courage to fight back? The day after the special aired, the mayor's office issued a statement condemning discriminatory practices within private neighborhood governance. The city would establish an independent task force to investigate HOA abuses. And they wanted Marcus to serve on it. Karen's name trended locally on social media. For all the wrong reasons. Then came the HOA meeting. Held in a packed town hall auditorium, it was standing room only. Karen wasn't present. But her supporters were, at first. One by one, they fell silent as residents shared stories: how their decorations were removed, their fences fined, their gardens inspected. And how it all seemed to happen only to certain neighbors. Marcus took the microphone last. I didn't come here to punish anyone, he said. I came here to protect what matters. Our dignity, our families, our homes. The vote was unanimous. Karen was removed from the HOA board. That night, Marcus received a knock on his door. It was Vanessa Corbin. Younger. Softer spoken. Dressed in business attire. She introduced herself as Karen's niece, and Ron's daughter. I'm not here to defend them, she said. I'm here because I need to make something right. She handed him a leather-bound book, his father's journal. I found this in my aunt's basement. She said it was junk. Marcus opened it slowly. There was his father's name, written in clean, careful ink. He didn't speak. He couldn't. I'm a civil rights attorney, Vanessa said. I've spent my whole career fighting the kind of thing my family became. I'm ashamed of what they did. But if you're willing, I'd like to help. They sat on his porch for over an hour, talking. About justice. About repair. About the work ahead. The next day, Officer Ron Corbin resigned from the police department. The internal investigation had uncovered a pattern of misconduct. The police chief issued a public apology. Marcus received an unexpected email from the president of the State Bar Association. Would he be willing to speak at their next conference? From victim to advocate. He agreed. At the end of the week, the city passed the Bennett Act, a resolution that prevented HOA boards from entering private property without documented homeowner consent. It also mandated anti-bias training for all HOA officials. When Marcus stood before the city council to witness the signing, the mayor looked him in the eye. "You didn't just stand up for yourself," she said. "You stood up for all of us." He nodded slowly, the weight of the past few weeks pressing gently on his shoulders. Karen may have started this. But Marcus? Marcus was going to finish it. And in doing so, he'd changed more than a policy. He'd changed a community. 1 week after the Bennett Act passed, Marcus Bennett was no longer just a nurse with a terrifying HOA story. He was now a household name in Maple Glen, and slowly, in wider civic circles. Invitations arrived in waves: university panels, leadership luncheons, legal roundtables. Everyone wanted a piece of the man who had turned a lawn-side yard sale into a legislative reckoning. But Marcus wasn't interested in becoming a celebrity. He wanted something deeper, something real. The Saturday after the act passed, he hosted a gathering at the Maple Glen Community Center. It was informal, no suits, no speeches. Just a few folding tables, coffee urns, and chairs arranged in a circle. He called it Neighbor to Neighbor. 30 people came. Among them were families who had lived under Karen's watchful eye for years: the Rodriguezes, who once got a fine for hanging prayer flags; Mrs. Patel, whose front yard garden had mysteriously been uprooted; and a Korean War veteran named Mr. Han, who quietly confessed that he had stopped putting up flags on Veterans Day after getting a warning letter. "I didn't think anyone would believe me," Mr. Han said. "I figured it was easier to stay quiet." Marcus just nodded. "Not anymore." He introduced Vanessa Corbin to the group. There were side eyes at first; after all, she carried the Corbin name. But when she spoke, people listened. "My family hurt this community," she said. "But I want to help fix what they broke." The room softened. Vanessa proposed forming a community oversight circle, separate from the HOA, with elected volunteers from diverse backgrounds. A group to review grievances, make recommendations, and advocate for neighbors being unfairly targeted. It would have no legal power, but a lot of moral power. Marcus watched the idea take root. That same week, he returned to work at the hospital. It felt strange, surreal even, to walk the bright, sterile hallways again. But his colleagues greeted him like a hero. Nurses clapped when he stepped into the break room. Patients smiled and whispered, "That's him." Yet Marcus didn't let it change him. He was still the same person who changed 4 bags and cleaned wounds. Justice work was important, but healing? That had always been his calling. On Thursday, Marcus received an envelope from the mayor's office. Inside was a certificate. Community Hero of the Year. Accompanying it was a handwritten note: "You reminded us what courage looks like in the face of pettiness and prejudice." Marcus didn't display it. He tucked it away in his desk drawer. Not because it didn't matter, but because his work wasn't done. Later that night, he spoke at a town-wide forum hosted by the city's Department of Human Rights. He talked about fear. About courage. About what it means when someone like Karen assumes your identity is a threat to their routine. "There are Karens everywhere," he said. "But there are people like us, too. People who speak. Who act. Who don't back down." The applause was thunderous. But Marcus heard something else in that moment: a shift. Not just in policy. Not just in perception. But in possibility. The fight for justice had begun with a yard sale. Now, it was a movement. Part 7. Healing Ground. Marcus's home had once been the site of invasion and chaos. Now, it was becoming a place of restoration. In the weeks that followed the forum, neighbors continued dropping by, not just to thank him, but to connect. Some brought food. Others brought stories. Many just wanted to sit on the porch and breathe. One evening, Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with her son, 12-year-old Luis. The boy clutched a notebook. "He wrote something for you," she said. Luis opened the pages. It was a hand-drawn comic strip, titled, "The Man Who Saved the Block." It showed Marcus as a superhero in scrubs, facing off against a dragon labeled HOA. Marcus laughed until his stomach hurt. Then he pulled Luis into a hug. In another moment of unexpected beauty, Marcus's old college friend Anthony returned, not as a lawyer, but as a brother. They shared a quiet evening, sipping coffee and reflecting. "You ever think this would happen?" Marcus asked. Anthony shook his head. "No. But I'm glad it did. Because you didn't just win, man. You healed something. That healing took root physically, too." A group of volunteers, led by Gloria One, organized a community cleanup and celebration called Maple Glen Forward. Instead of fireworks or parades, the focus was service. Fixing fences. Planting flowers. Painting benches. Marcus helped plant a garden in the center of the park. Lavender, rosemary, sunflowers, all donated. Someone made a sign, "Justice grows here." By the end of that week, Marcus received a formal invitation. The National Fair Housing Alliance wanted him to keynote their annual summit in Washington, D.C. He accepted. Not for the spotlight, but for the chance to tell people in power that change didn't start in courts or conferences. It started with a man refusing to let someone steal his story. 1 year to the day after the infamous yard sale, the Maple Glen Community Alliance hosted a block-wide festival. Tables lined the sidewalks. Food from every culture steamed under white tents. A jazz band played near the roundabout. Children drew chalk murals on the pavement, some depicting gardens, others superheroes. In the center of the park stood a small stage. Marcus stepped up with a quiet smile, waving to over 300 people gathered there. "I don't have a speech," he began. "Just a memory. 1 year ago, I stood on my front lawn, looking at my life laid out on folding tables. And now, I stand here, surrounded by something I never expected, family." The crowd clapped, many wiping away tears. Councilman Harper announced the final surprise of the day. "Thanks to the leadership of Marcus Bennett, and the unity of this community, I present to you the official renaming of this park." He pulled the cover off a plaque. "Bennett Square, where justice took root." Marcus froze. Tears welled. He wasn't prepared for this. Children ran to hug him. Adults followed. In that moment, he understood, he hadn't just rebuilt his home. He'd helped everyone find theirs. In every neighborhood, there lies a quiet struggle, not just between lawns and property lines, but between dignity and dominance, between silence and speaking up. The story of Marcus Bennett reminds us that justice often begins in the most unassuming places: a front yard, a folded table, a neighbor who goes too far. What started as a violation became a movement. Not because Marcus fought with anger, but because he responded with principle, patience, and persistence. He didn't allow prejudice to define him, nor did he let power silence him. Instead, he stood his ground, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or unprotected in their own community. For adults and seniors alike, the message is profound: our most powerful tool is not authority, but courage guided by wisdom. Karen used the HOA to control. Marcus used truth to transform. In an age where it's easier to scroll past injustice or convince ourselves someone else will deal with it, Marcus teaches that lasting change is built on personal responsibility, layered with empathy, fortified by integrity. One man's resolve realigned a whole town's conscience. And perhaps most beautiful of all, that change grew not from revenge, but from healing, a boy's drawing, a neighbor's apology, a niece's redemption. So, whether you're facing a small injustice or bearing witness to a greater wrong, remember this: change begins when ordinary people say, "Not today." You don't need a title to lead. You don't need permission to be brave. You just need to take that first step, and stay standing when it counts. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of what's worth protecting, I invite you to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss more stories that matter. And in the comments, tell us, have you ever had to stand your ground? What did you learn? Let's keep this conversation going, because community begins with connection, and together, we rise.